Everybody get up, no need to cram now. We got a real jam going down, going down, going down, going down, going down, going down. Welcome to the IntelliJAMS.
It's good. I'm doing good, man. How you doing?
What's up? I'm feeling fired up. I love IntelliJAMS. I'm excited to be jamming with you today.
So I have an idea for a jam.
Yeah, what do you want to jam about?
That I think kind of like goes back. So it might have been topic number like 1 or 2 on IntelliJAMS. I don't even know what episode we're on now, like 20 something. So this was months ago. But we had a jam on price testing. And a lot of people know us for price testing. A lot of people come to IntelliJAMS for price testing. But I feel like we haven't really given it a ton of airtime on the podcast lately. So I want to jam a little bit about price testing. I want to talk about how to do it, why do it. But yeah, just like generally jam on it. So like maybe that's the best place to start is price testing. What is it? Why do it? And then let's get into some more specific stuff.
Cool. I mean, let's start with the why. I think that price is one of the biggest levers that any company has in order to help make their, business work or not. So, whether you're a software company or selling pancake mix, like price is a feature of your product, and it's something that like everyone is always going to consider, and it's important to get right. And if you price it too high, then you could be missing opportunity to sell it to more people, and if you price it too low, you could be missing margin opportunity. So super important lever. Every business matters, and that's why we should be thinking and considering price.
Yeah, I think that it is one of the biggest levers, and I think it's something that historically people didn't think to test. But in terms of like retail, I think like testing prices is something like e-com is usually a little bit behind retail, in my opinion. And retail is like price testing wasn't something that was like naturally easy to do in retail because like obviously there was a lot of problems with that. Like if I want to test my pricing, I have to go relabel things. I have to go change a bunch of stuff. Like the cost of doing a test like that was so high that I think like that might be one of the reasons that like e-com, like we are now in an era where we're seeing a lot more price testing, but like I think we were a little, I don't know, were we a little slow to get here because we didn't have this kind of like historical context in retail?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. Let me also like take a step back and like about how people approach price in general. And like, maybe this is obvious to people listening, but like my perspective is that there's sort of 3 main inputs to how much your price, like what's the right price? Like one is costs. So how much does it cost to manufacture or produce that product or service? Number 2 is like your competition. How much is your competition charging for a similar type of thing? And number 3 is like the value, like how much perceived value from the buyer is there in this thing. And so often in retail or e-commerce, we hear people very anchored on the first 2, your competition and your cost. So they'll be like, I have this cost base, I want 45% gross margins, and therefore like I need to price it at this in order to hit that. And then we looked at our competitors. We saw that we were like priced in between these 2 or 3 competitors that we think we're comparable to. And so that was like perfect. And so that's where we landed on price. Great. However, like what we didn't talk about is like how much your customers are willing to pay for your thing. And that's like part of why
The most important one.
Maybe is like one of the most important things. And like one of, honestly, quite frankly, it's a super important input into figuring out what your price should be. And it's really hard to know. So I think like it's very easy to know what your competitors are pricing it at. Go to the website. They're like for more complex things, there's tools for that. And they've been around for a long time. There's like very easy to figure out what your costs are and to like add, formula on top of that. So those are very easy and like deterministic to do. Knowing how much people are willing to pay, it's like, oh, do I do a survey? Do I ask people on the street? Like, how do I know? And I would argue that like the reason we started IntelliJAMS is to answer that question. How much are people willing to pay for your product, and be able to have a confident signal behind that to help inform your pricing decision. And so price testing specifically, we talk about pricing generally, and then price testing is the tool that you can use to answer how much people are willing to spend on this product.
So as we get into price, like yeah, for me, like costs, obviously, like you know what your costs are. You want to make a certain amount of money. Competition, I can easily look at that. What is someone willing to pay? And again, that's like a really hard one to answer with. I mean, you hit on a few things like surveys, these sorts of things, but like the marketer in me is like surveys tell you nothing.
Yeah.
Surveys usually just give you like a lot of false inputs. So it's like, hey, the only way to really know that is to put something in front of a customer and see if they're willing to actually put their money up for it. Like me saying I'm going to buy something or I'd be willing to buy something in a survey is a lot different than me actually taking my credit card out and like putting my information in and making the purchase. So if IntelliJAMS and like price testing is designed to answer this, like what is someone willing to buy? How do I instrument a test to answer that question for me? Maybe we'll keep it like very specific for like example purposes in here, and maybe let's like scope it to a product. It's like, hey, how do I figure out what someone's willing to pay for a product?
Yeah. I mean, let's imagine an example. Let's say sweaters. Let's say you sell these like really nice knit alpaca, AB alpaca sweaters. Okay. The one like way that you might say, hey, I want to measure how much people are willing to pay. I've been selling these sweaters for $150. But then last week I changed the price to $175, and I'm selling just as many sweaters as I was the week when it was $150. And so that might be like an indication to me that people are just as willing to pay $175 as they were $150. The problem is that like there's no good counterfactual there. The counterfactual is last week. And it may be the case that last week was 95 degrees and this week the temperature dropped by 70 degrees and now it's 30 degrees. And I'm in Fahrenheit. I know you're Canadian, but in Fahrenheit, now it's cold. And people are out buying sweaters. So yeah, more people, like your sales didn't go down even though you increased the price by 15%. But wait, like maybe your sales would have actually gone up by a lot because you had you not increased the price. So that's what I mean by counterfactual. And so, you know, with a price test, the way we think about an A/B test for pricing is we're splitting traffic in real time, large amounts of traffic. So every visitor to your site is like sort of would be the gold standard approach. All that traffic is split randomly with no bias, with no sort of like time or seasonality input. Then for each of those buckets of traffic, we can measure how many people buy at those different prices. And that's a very true apples to apples comparison because each of those buckets represents the same amount of traffic over the same period of time in the same places, all split randomly. And now we actually can say, hey, people are willing to spend this much on, when you increase your prices from 150 to 175, sales dropped off by X. And it may be that like the way we do that is when you ran the test, all the sales of $1 were up because the temperature dropped. So we're basically able to make a really good apples to apples comparison. And that's the reason why, a price test is better than maybe a different, more circuitous way of trying to understand what people are willing to pay.
Yeah, being able to A/B test it and like actually randomly sort into those test groups rather than like, I like this example because also when you said sweater, I thought we were going in a Canadianism here because in Canada we call hoodies sweaters, but then we went the alpaca route and I was like, oh, okay, this is it. But so we have this A/B
levers and I said levers, and so now we're all about the Canadian American differences right now.
I usually try to hide it, and there's certain words where it definitely comes out. Okay, so we got don't just change the price. That's not going to be an accurate reflection of like what someone willing to pay more for this, like what your sales actually do. There's a lot of external factors you might not be accounting for. Seasonality, competition did something. There's so many things. So we're going to run an A/B test. Makes sense to me. What do I do? Like I'm priced at 150 normally. Yeah. You, Adam, you're going to go run a price test on my alpaca sweaters. What do I set my test prices at? How would you figure that out and what would I do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the best approach, and it always depends, and there's probably exceptions to this rule, but the way I would approach it is I don't necessarily have a reason to believe that 150 is the right approach. And I don't have a reason to believe that it's too high or too low. And so I'm going to start exploring. And you have this like kind of concept in computer science around like, search algorithms. And there's all sorts of different search algorithms, but basically what we're searching for is the best price. And so in order to search for the best price, I'm going to look a little bit left, I'm going to look a little bit right, and I'm going to sort of see what's near the field of vision. And so what I mean by that is we'll go a little bit to the downside of 150 and a bit to the upside. And how big of a change we make has a lot to do with how much data we're getting, how sensitive we think people actually will be. But I think a good starting point would be, say, 5 to 10%. And so 10% of 150 is $15. So, maybe 135, 139 on the low side, maybe 165, 169 to the high side. Would be a really good place to start. Again, there might be considerations where it's like, if you know that this sweater costs you $139 to manufacture and you're selling it for $150, I probably wouldn't go price test $139. So there's like, of course, going to be exceptions to this approach. However, I would look probably 5 or 10-ish percent to the left, 5 or 10-ish percent to the right, and do a sort of like a ABC test where the control group is the current price in the middle, and I go a bit higher and lower, and then run data, collect from there.
Cool. So we're basically going to straddle the original price, ideally by the same amount up and the same amount down, so that like we're trying to get like the best results inside of this like zone.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be. I think the reason to do that is because we're choosing an amount that is large enough to help us get signal quickly, because there's always going to be like, we've talked on a previous pod about statistical significance and effect size and minimal detectable effect and things like that. But we want a big enough change to have a meaningful impact. We don't want so big of a change that it's out of the realm of possibility, right? Theoretically, I chose 150 originally for a reason. I'm not going to go tomorrow and sell it for $250 overnight. So I want it to be within the realm of reason. And so that's where I come up with this 5 to 10%. But again, I think that like, it doesn't have to be symmetrical. It doesn't affect the quality per se of the test, or like you're not tarnishing the nature of the setup if it's not symmetrical.
Yep. Okay. So we decided we're going to do an A/B test. We decided we're going to straddle this original price. We launched this test. We got a little bit of an ABC going here. We got our control. We got our lower. We got our higher. Adam, what are this test has ran. Let's ignore statistical significance for a second, but this test has been running for a while. I've collected enough data that I want to go look at it. What are you looking for?
What are we looking at? Oh, a couple weeks have gone by, and actually I might be checking in on this every single day just to see, not to be hyper aware of the day over day changes, but just to make sure that like things are going well. I'm now 2 or 3 weeks in. I'm seeing that like the data is starting to look consistent day over day and converging. The metric I'm looking at is profit per visitor. And so there's probably 4 metrics that I'm looking at overall always, but the one I'm keyed in on is profit per visitor. But the 4 metrics are conversion, number 2, AOV. The third is revenue per visitor, and revenue per visitor is going to be the multiplier of conversion times AOV. So like if 5% of people buy and your AOV is 100, your revenue per visitor is going to be $5. And then profit per visitor is going to be the one that I'm actually most interested in, which is taking out gross costs from that. The reason I care about profit versus revenue versus conversion in AOV is because at the end of the day, I mean, from a business perspective, like what I care about is profit. But if we think about like, what are the mechanisms that are happening here? As I lower the price, that will probably have downward pressure on AOV. And we know we generally want higher AOVs, but a lower price is going to put downward pressure on AOV. That's known. It'll probably have a lift on conversion. That's great. On revenue per visitor, we have a lower number times a higher number. That could end up lower or higher. But then what we really want to know is, well, did we make more money? Because we might have made more revenue, and maybe the increase in conversion outweighed the decrease in AOV. However, if we made more revenue, but we've compressed our margins so much that we're actually making less profit, that probably is a bad outcome. And so profit per visitor is the metric that I think tells the whole story. And the only difference, by the way, between profit per visitor and total profit, the reason we normalize per visitor, in this case, we say, the groups are of equal sizes. It doesn't really matter whether or not I normalize per visitor or not. But because it's an A/B test, and because we allow you the option to like say, 50% in a group and 25%, 25% in other groups, we're not normalizing for the size of each group. And so that way we can easily compare apples to apples between the groups. But basically profit per visitor is going to be directly like proportional to the amount of money that you're making, assuming that you have like a fixed amount of traffic going to your site. So profit per visitor is the total amount of profit that you're making. And like, that's what we're trying to optimize for, especially when we're testing prices. Like, yeah, we could be growing revenue, but if it's at much more compressed margins and our total profits going down, it's probably not a good outcome.
All right, let's go one more layer deep here, and then we'll probably call it. So we decided we're doing an A/B test. We decided we're going to straddle. We're looking at the results. We're looking at a profit per visitor. I want to pick the profit maximizing price.
Maximize the profit.
Let's say it's the 135.
Yeah.
And what do I do from here? Like, I now have 135. Like, would you recommend testing further? Like, do I now take that 135 and then straddle that one, like to try to like narrow in even further? Like, or do I just say, hey, 135 is looking good. This is the profit maximizing outcome. I'm good with that.
Yeah. I think I would ask myself two questions. One is how big of like 135 being the lower price means that we've increased our conversion, presumably by a lot more than we've lowered the price and also our profit per unit sold. So that means that people are way more interested in buying this at a lower cost. Like, I would be curious how much more of that volume of sales we could go by lowering it even further. So that's like one consideration. The other question I would ask though is like, what are my cost basis? Like, do I still have really healthy margins at 135? If I'm concerned about those margins any deeper, if I have a floor where it's like, I for whatever reason, my CFO told me I can't go below these gross margins, that might be a consideration. So I would say another straddle would be a great suggestion. But and the reason is also like there might have been a price there where we know that elasticities are non-linear. And so it may be that the reason I would say like from 135, you now do say 129 and 139. And the reason to do that is because maybe like there was some magical thing that happened at 140 or between 140 and 139. And maybe it turns out that you got all of the benefit of the increase in conversion as soon as you drop below 140, but going from 135 to 139, maybe you're able to capture $4 back of margin. So that's why you would straddle again. It's like, does discounting even deeper continue to juice conversion? Did I capture something magical, non-linear at 140 that actually if I price at 139, then I can like reclaim some margin having captured this like additional volume. So that's why you would do another straddle. But yet a totally other option would be, hey, like, what about my alpaca pajamas? Let me go test those. Maybe they're not my bestseller, but I have like a big catalog and I want to like test my pajamas and then my socks. And so, sometimes it's just best to take the W and move on.
I think that's where I would go. We should probably do another jam on this. I think like that covered the basics of like, why should I price test? How am I going to do it? What am I looking for? But I think like a lot of people approach price testing as like, in our Alpaca example is, hey, I want to know, can I raise my prices? Can I lower my prices? I'm going to test it and I'm going to figure out the answer to that question. But I think like, obviously both of us here at IntelliJAMS, we're going to encourage you to like, continue to experiment, continue to learn, don't stand still. And it's like, hey, I can further hone in on this specific product. I could then open this up to a different like collection of products. I could go to my alpaca pajamas. Like there are so many ways that prices are interconnected across my catalog that like I can always be learning from testing something and always be moving closer and closer to my my absolute profit optimized point. I would argue you're never going to get there, but you can kind of infinitely approach it.
And I would argue that that point is a moving target, because as soon as
Yes.
you lower your price to 135, maybe your competitor lowers prices, or maybe Trump instates tariffs, and all of a sudden the world in which we lived in, when you ran this price test and you learned that 135 was more like allowed you to achieve a higher profit than at 150, that world is now different than it was last week because of all sorts of different factors, between your costs changing, the competitive dynamics changing, and the world and people's willingness to spend changing. And so I think that, we're constantly going to be looking for the opportunity to find and grow our profits. And like that optimal place and those optimal strategies are constantly, it's a moving target. So we kind of be searching for how to find it.
Everything is volatile. Always be testing.